There has been an increase in consumers seeking locally grown, nutritious foods that help them stay healthy. Small acreage farmers can take advantage of this growing market by identifying and producing high-value foods such as blueberries. But what does it take to become a small acreage blueberry producer? Riley Creek Blueberry Farm, owned by Stan, Anita, and Whitney Louise Urmann, was one of the first small acreage blueberry farms in the Idaho Panhandle. Over the past 8 years, Stan has established blueberries on 3 of the 8 acres. Stan explains his family's decision to change careers, move to Idaho, and become small acreage blueberry farmers.
I was born and raised in Northern California on an apple farm. My dad was one of the larger apple growers in that area. So I had a pretty good background in farming. I went from the chance to be an apple farmer to education and got into teaching, and I taught for about 15 years in Northern California. We had property here up in northern Idaho, so we were spending quite a bit of time here. My wife also teaches. We had an opportunity about 10 years ago to move up here full time. And I was kind of on the edge of my teaching career, so we were looking for something a little different. Farming was a natural thing for me to get back into. I always enjoyed what we were doing. So it came down to what we wanted to plant or what we thought we could grow here. Blueberries were one of our first choices, mainly because we knew they would do well here. They liked the cold climate. There were a few small blueberry farms around that were doing pretty well. And blueberries, as opposed to raspberries and blackberries, have a much longer shelf life. They stay on the bush longer, and there's just seem a lot easier at the time to handle, as opposed to the blackberries and raspberries and other type of berries out there. We wanted to find the right type of soil. So we were looking for a soil that had a pH value of somewhere around 4.5 to 5 or 6, somewhere in that, a somewhat acidic soil that would be susceptible to growing blueberries. Also the sandy, loamy soil, which we knew we had down there, was very important. So once we knew we had the right soil situation, the next criteria we felt was it getting plenty of sun. This spot we found was pretty much ideal. It was on a rolling slope that had excellent exposure to the sun. The soil was good, had great drainage, and again, I'd had time over the course of a year to evaluate this, so we knew going in that we had a pretty good place. Okay, we're going to plant blueberries. That's what we want to do. Well, what kind of blueberries are you going to plant? There's hundreds of thousands of different varieties, from low bush to high bush. We went with the high bush variety because that's the variety that does well here in the West. We wanted a variety that would be winter hardy. You want to look for a variety that's going to be able to withstand our temperatures, and it has to have a fairly shorter growing season than some of the other berries, because again, we'll have a late frost and an early frost. I mean, we've had frost in June, which isn't so bad. We don't mind the frost when the berries have already set. The problem can be if we're having a frost when they're in their bud or in their bloom. The varieties we decided on, our base blueberry is called Blue Crop, and it's probably the most popular blueberry grown in America. The reason it was chosen was that it does well in Minnesota and the Midwestern states, which I felt kind of had a comparable winters to us and growing season. So that was our #1 berry. So we based everything around the Blue Crop, and I wanted a berry that came in a little bit earlier than the Blue Crop to maybe hit the market on the early side, and I wanted one a little bit later. So I chose the Berkeley for the later berry and the Northland for the earlier berry. So we have 3 different varieties. Again, they all kind of come in at a little bit different time, which means they're blooming at a little bit different time. Their bud breakage is at a little bit different time, which is good. If we had a frost on May 15th, I may suffer some damage to the Berkeleys, and that happened 2 years ago, and we lost probably half of our Berkeley crop. But I still had a full crop and everything else. We're trying a new variety now that is called a Duke. It's supposed to come in really early so that we can compete a little bit against the Oregon berries that get ripe in June, late June, early July. Another one of the reasons that we chose blueberries was that the equipment outlay and expense was not a lot. You need a tractor or something you can work your soil, especially in the beginning if you're starting with a fresh planting. But your initial plowing and disking and cultivating is really not necessary after that first planting. So we went out and bought an older Massey Ferguson tractor in 1953 for $2,500, and that's basically the only piece of equipment we have. I have a small 4-foot rototiller on the back. I have a solo backpack that we use to control our weeds with at times for any type of spraying that we may need to do. Some shovels and hose, and that's about it. We've since progressed over the years. I have a nice little 4-wheeler that we use, an ATV, that is nice to run around the fields and pack our berries out with and stuff. But equipment outlay is very, very minimal for the blueberries.
Once Stan had prepared the field by plowing the grass under and disking, it was time to plant.
We're going to start off with maybe 100 or 200 plants. Well, we got a little greedy and we thought that, well, it's going to take 3 or 4 years before we start producing anyway. Let's put in a little more. So 300 turned to 500, and eventually we ended up with 1,500 plants that we had ordered. They were already 3 to 4 year old plants, so they were very good-rooted, established plants. In fact, they would have had berries that first year if we would allow them to. In hindsight, I think I probably would have taken another year to work the ground and possibly control the weeds a little bit better. But again, we didn't want to waste that year. We wanted to get those berries in the ground. Once our ground was worked up, we knew we were going to need water right away. So I'd already put in a well on the property, and we'd already ran our underground irrigation system out. We hadn't, of course, run the lines down the rows, but we had water available upon planting, which was very important because we were planting in the spring. The berries were going to go through a major shock at transplant, and they needed a lot of water at that time. The actual planting it wasn't very difficult. You know, we set our field out beforehand. We knew how many plants we were going to have. The spacing on blueberries is very important. Most people have a small amount of land and want to get as many as they can, so they put their berries a little bit too close together, and we end up with tight rows. And when you first got a 3-year-old plant in there, it looks pretty good. But after about 7 or 8 years, when they're starting to reach their maturity and the plants are growing up, they're taking up a lot of space. We tried to stretch it out as far as we could. Our rows are 10 feet apart, and our plants down the individual rows are 5 feet apart. I would probably, if I had to do it again, I would go probably 12 and 6 or 8 feet on the spacing, as they are starting to grow in a little bit tighter. The other consideration in your planting too is the type of equipment you're going to use to get down the rows and leave yourself. We have blocks of 500 plants at a time, and then we have a big opening, and so the pickers can get in and out and so on. And we did plan that ahead of time, so our field is set up pretty ideally, I feel. Other than that, the planting was very simple. Again, with a shallow root system, we didn't have to dig real deep holes. That's when you need a lot of neighbors and friends to come in and help you. And the planting went real easy. We were able to get the 1,500 plants in within a week's time.
In order to shape the plants for maximum berry production, Stan prunes the plants at establishment and every following spring.
Blueberry bushes need to be pruned. They're a bush. The actual pruning is very important. A typical blueberry bush at maturity has 7 to 8 stalks that are in constant growth. One of them may be a first-year stalk, another one may be a 10-year stalk. That stalk will last approximately 10 to 12 years before it dries up and won't produce any berries. We prune it out, get rid of it, but meanwhile we have other ones taking its place. So the actual blueberry bush itself will last for a long time, will last our lifetime, while the individual stalks are only lasting 7 to 10 years of actual production. So pruning, what we do when we're pruning is to try to keep new stuff coming, old stuff out, to open up the bush so that the inside is getting plenty of sunlight. We try to keep the bush pruned up from the bottom so that branches and berries aren't sitting on the ground and we don't have to bend over quite so far to pick the berries. And then likewise we try to top them off on the top because they are a high bush blueberry and they will continue to grow to 10 or 12 feet. So we keep them at about 5 to 6. By pruning them, our berries get bigger and they get sweeter. If we didn't prune our berries, there would be a lot more berries on there, but they wouldn't get real big and they probably wouldn't get real sweet because there's more berries competing for, a limited amount of nutrients and water. Irrigation and watering of the blueberries is very, very important. Blueberries need water. They use a lot of water. Typically during the summer months when they start maturing, we put a gallon of water per plant a day, unless it rains that day. So with approximately 3,000 plants, that's almost 3,000 gallons of water every day for almost 2 months. We chose the drip system because it was the most economical use of the water for this situation, especially with the amount of plants and the amount of water that we were using. Our emitters, each plant has a little emitter next to it that is programmed to emit 1 gallon of water per hour. So it's not real complicated. In an hour we know that it's done.
Another advantage to drip irrigation is, unlike overhead sprinklers, leaves and berries stay clean and dry. This helps avoid problems with plant disease.
The best recommendation that I could give to people is talk to irrigation people. I mean, there are people around in the area that can direct you on the type of irrigation system you want to use.
When it comes to pollination, Stan gives the local honeybees some help by partnering with a honey producer who brings hives to the farm during bloom. 5 to 7 hives of honeybees, along with the area's wild bee population, assure good fruit production.
Our biggest worry and our biggest job is the weed control. We've sprayed with different types of herbicides. We haven't really found anything that is totally effective. We've spent the last 3 years with just pulling weeds by hand. And again, we're at the point where last harvest season, the weeds were so overpowering in the bushes that we lost a certain percentage of our berries because we couldn't get to them because of the weeds that were growing up into the bushes. There are other options out there. We're trying with our mulch. We're trying to use more and more mulch to help suppress the weeds. They have some fabric out there that you can place down over your rows. We're experimenting with some of that right now that helps suppress the weeds. But the weed control is probably the biggest concern that we have, and it's something that if I was to start all over again, I would spend more time researching and trying to solve that problem.
Weeds between the rows are controlled by mowing or by using selective herbicides. Stan is also considering using cover crops to help decrease weed competition. In some areas, large game animals can be a problem. Deer fencing can be expensive, so it's worth doing some investigation. So far, Stan hasn't had any trouble.
The birds are a little bit of a problem, and as we start getting more and more production and we have the birds start finding that the blueberries are there, it is a little bit of a problem. But again, they don't eat enough that we worry about it too much. Gophers and moles are a little bit of a problem, but we've usually been able to handle those on an individual basis with poison and trapping, depending on how severe the situation is and what time of the year it is. We don't use we'll use poison in the fall after the harvest is done, but we won't use any kind of poison in the spring or when berries are being formed. One of the advantages of blueberry harvest is that they don't become ripe all at the same time. We'll start picking, we have 3 different varieties of berries. We'll start picking in about, on an average year, about the middle of July, and we'll finish picking by the first week of September. So we have about a 6 to 7 week period where we're picking the fruit off the bushes. And as I mentioned, they grow in clusters. And early on, there may only be 1 or 2 or 5 berries in that cluster of 30 or 40 that are ripe. Again, that's good in that we're going to have berries spread over a period of time. It's bad in that if the picker's not doing a good job, we're going to end up with green berries in the bucket. So it takes a while for the pickers to understand the right techniques to roll off the ripe berries. We've also found that the first couple years we were very concerned about only picking the ripest berries. Well, I've since found out through experimentation and some just luck that you can pick them, leave them out in a cool area. They don't have to be in the cooler, because once they're in the cooler they won't ripen up, but you can leave them out in a cool shady spot for 12 to 14 hours, 16 hours, and they will ripen up to some degree, and their sugar content will go up and they'll turn color a little bit, and so that's helped us quite a bit in our harvest.
Harvesting several acres of blueberries requires an adequate labor force. Stan learned this the hard way and shares his experience.
Not really knowing what we were doing, I figured, well, I could go out and pick an awful lot of blueberries, so myself and my mom went out when they got ripe and started picking, and we had 10 rows of berries, and we picked about a half of 1 row the first day. By about the 4th day, we realized this wasn't going to work. We rely a lot on local help, the kids in the area, and it takes a while to pick blueberries. And if you're doing really well, you can pick 20 to 25 pounds in an hour. Well, we're at a point now where we're picking 1,000 pounds a day. And you can only really pick in the mornings when it's cooler. We don't like to pick in the afternoons when it's hot because the berries get soft. And again, one of our biggest selling points with our berries is the freshness and that they're a good shelf life berry. We pick in 5-pound buckets. The pickers bring them in. Most of our pickers are paid by the pound they pick. So they bring them into our little picking shed, which is a shady area, weigh in their pick, take off with a clean bucket, and I usually have a sorter that will run these berries and sort out any green ones or stem. Once they're cleaned, we keep them in a flat tray, so there's only about an inch or so of berries on top of each other, and they're put in the cooler. A lot of people will put them in a big bucket and stick them in a cooler and think it's going to work, but the berries in the middle never really cool off. We can keep them in these small sorting trays for 24 hours. The berries are completely cooled down to about 34 degrees, and now when we take them out on the market, their shelf life is going to be to the extent that they can be, up to 2 weeks. I think our first year we harvested 2,500 pounds of berries. Well, all of a sudden I wake up one day, we go out, my mom and I pick our berries, and we've got 100 pounds of berries after a day and a half. Well, now what are we going to do with these berries? Well, let's go to the farmer's market with them. They're selling them there. Well, we were able to sell 150 pounds at the farmer's market, and pretty soon I wasn't able to I came home from the farmer's market, I wasn't able to sell all I had. And I'm thinking, now what am I going to do? I've got these berries, and I've got to get rid of them. Well, there's some big stores in town. Let me go by this big store and see if they want them. Well, heck, they didn't want my berries. They were already getting them from somewhere else, and they didn't want mine. So I had to start thinking about things and how I could get rid of these berries. I put ads in papers, and that helped. I had some people call up and buy them, and I hit up all my friends, bought a lot of berries that first year. When all was said and done, by the end of the first season, I was able to get rid of all our berries through either farmers markets, friends, neighbors, people in the community, and so forth. I had a year then to think about that this isn't going to work. I could barely get rid of 2,000 pounds. How am I going to get rid of my ultimate goal of 20,000 pounds? I started going out to the local stores and trying to sell my product. And it's not as easy as you may think, because produce managers in stores, their life is tough enough. I have one item, a blueberry. They have 50 items in their store. They can't worry about the little blueberry guy. So you got to go in there and try to sell them that this is going to be the easiest thing for you. You don't have to do anything. I bring them, I pick them up. You know, don't worry about it. I'll make sure you have you just call me and you'll have whatever you want. So I did some things that second year that a lot of people thought were pretty silly. I would go into a store with 10 flats of berries and I'd say, here, take these 10 flats of berries. Don't even give me any money for them. I'll come back in a week and whatever you don't sell, I'll take back. And whatever you do sell, here's the price. And I have to admit, I found out what he was paying for his other berries and I sold them cheaper than what he was buying them from. And he goes, well, this is a good deal. And I think in the 7 years that I've been doing this type of method, I've taken back maybe 20 pounds of berries. They sell, and I knew they would sell. I have people that come up and say, you know, well, this store has them on sale for this price. Why should I buy them from you for more? Because these are fresh. These were picked yesterday. These were picked locally. Yours were picked probably 10 days ago. Who knows where and who knows what are on them. I can tell you exactly what are on these blueberries and what's not on them. So we've always pushed the local angle, and we have a tremendous advantage here in North Idaho in that there's not a lot of us doing that.
Stan depends on wholesale and retail customers. He explains why he's developed both strategies.
Wholesale and retail, we need both. Our retail market, the U-pick, on-farm sales, the farmer's market, makes up approximately 30% of our total sales, which is not, you know, it's not our major part, but in a lot of ways it is. We get a little better price for the retail items, close to almost 25 cents a pound more, which adds up when you're talking several thousand pounds. But it also gives us a chance to communicate with the community, with the customer. I can't tell you how many times I've had customers come up to me and say, you ought to call this guy at this fruit stand. He'd really like your blueberries. And I've done it, and I've gained good wholesale customers because of a retail customer. So I've got to have the retail, and it's something we're always expanding. We try to add a farmer's market every year. We go currently to 4 different farmers markets during the week, and it's hard work. It takes a lot of time, and sometimes you wonder why we're sitting at a farmer's market when I could have just taken all these berries and dropped them off at one place. But it's always worth it once we're there. The drive there sometimes is not that enjoyable, but once we're there and we're talking with the people, it's really worth it.
60% of his sales are through wholesale outlets. Wholesale customers buy large quantities of berries, but require more effort and expense than retail customers.
You're not getting as much money for them, and it's actually more work. I put more money in the packaging of my wholesale fruit than I do my retail. Most of my retail stuff is sold in a gallon baggie, you know, that costs 2 cents, as opposed to a pint basket where I've got a nickel in the pint, I've got 3 cents in the lid, I've put a 2-cent label on it, and then I've paid somebody to package that for me. And then I've had to drive it all over the state to deliver it. So there's a lot more expense with less return. But I can't sell the other 60% at the retail level. So you have to be able to reach out there. And you know it's going to cost you more, and you know your profit margin is going to be a lot less, but that's just the nature of the deal.
Stan's packaging reflects his philosophy of promoting a locally grown, fresh product.
The packaging of our product is very important. We try to stay simple, but at the same time, it needs to be very professional. It needs to be clean. It needs to look nice, and we try really hard to always put a little label on there that gives us our name and our address, because inevitably people will call us up on that number, or they'll write us, or somehow get a hold of us and say, well, can I come out and pick these berries? If you're local, why can't I just come and get them from you? Can you give me a better deal than the store? You bet I can. And the store people have always been really good about that. We're even at a point where most of our stores, when they're carrying our berries, will put up our sign near their berries with our phone number, address on it. It's helping them because they're selling a local product, and it's helping me because now I'm picking up retail customers from a wholesale outlet. So it helps both of us when we do that, and I do pick up some customers that way.
Stan enjoys inviting customers to his farm to pick blueberries. His U-Pick customer base continues to grow. As Stan has learned, U-Pick operations have some unique challenges that occur anytime the public comes onto the farm.
9! We're all picking 9 pounds.
Another area that we've gotten into to a large degree the last couple of years has been the U-Pick people coming out. We've always had people that have come out. We've never really advertised, in the beginning anyway, we never really advertised having U-Pick as a method of sales, but people would always stop by and say, "Could we come out and pick?" And I'd always say, "Yeah." And they would go out and find the best bushes and pick those, and my pickers would always get mad at me because the U-Pick people would come and find the nice bushes and leave behind the others, and they would have to go back and pick them. So we had a little problem that we had to work through there, and we solved that by creating an area that's just for U-Pick. I have one block of 500 bushes that is just used for U-Pickers. They come out, there are signs around that say these first 15 rows are yours to go to. Please do not venture beyond that. You can go anywhere you want in those 15 rows. And we found, since we've done that in the last couple of years, they do a very good job at it. And they, you know, whenever you have people come onto your farm, you're going to experience problems. There's going to be some people that, for whatever reason, aren't going to follow the directions. They're going to think the ones over there are better than the ones where they're at. So they wander around and will pick in areas you don't want them to pick. Some people will drive their car out where you say, there's a sign that says no cars allowed. Some people will leave garbage behind. Whenever you have people on your farm, there's going to be problems. But we've always felt that the benefits far outweigh the problems. And to be honest with you, our U-Pick situation is something that we're trying to expand. And if I could have people come out and pick all my berries U-Pick, that would be great. Then I wouldn't have to worry about driving around trying to sell them.
Customers are drawn to U-Picks not only for fresh, locally grown produce, but also for the experience of being on the farm.
We feel it's very important to have people come out to our farm. Most of our U-Pick people are either retired, and they come out just to get out of the house and do something, and talk about when they were a kid and they used to pick prunes or pears or apples or whatever. And then the other percentage of people that come are young people with their kids. And they're coming out and they're telling their kid how when they were their age, they were, and it's just a really good deal. It's really, you know, when you're, the times that I am there, and I'm not there enough, but the times I'm there, it's really exciting. I mean, the kids are having a good time, they're picking some fruit, they're eating a lot of it, but, you know, we weigh them before and after, so we get their money. We actually chose our name real early on, before I even planted my first bush. And we chose Riley Creek because people know a little, they know where Riley Creek is. Some people do. It's in Laclede, Idaho. The creek runs right through our property, or right near our property. It's the name of the road that our farm is on. And choosing a name is important. It needs to be short enough that you can put it on all your stuff without, you know, going broke paying for printing. Yet it needs to be catchy enough that people have an idea what you're talking about. So our name was there was some thought put into that. We just didn't, you know, choose Riley Creek Farms or Riley Creek Blueberry Farm. And then the next step was, and again, I had business cards printed up, again, before I even planted my first bush. So I could start spreading those around and sticking them up here and there. And I put my daughter's name on our card. It's a family business. People look at it and they see Stan and Anita and Whitney Louise Urmann. I mean, she's as much as the farm and the business as, and that portrays an image to somebody that looks at our card. It's just not my name, it's my wife's and my child's name. It's a family business. By the second year, I had a brochure made up. And again, it was a simple thing that I had done on my computer and had printed up. It had some blueberry recipes, a map to our farm. We printed up several thousand of those, and I was spreading those around like crazy. You know, any farmer's market, giving them away. When people come to a farmer's market, they want to leave with something in their hand, especially if it's free. So we have a brochure. We try to update it every year. Sometimes we don't update it much and it looks the same. Maybe we'll just change the color of the paper. But we have the brochure as part of an advertising tool, and I think it works. We advertise in the local newspapers and the Nicholsworth and some of the other little things that go around during the season. We've thinking about going on the radio next year and doing some radio advertising. We'll probably spend several $100s and take out a big ad in one of the local newspapers right the week before harvest, maybe like a half-page ad. It might cost several $100s, but people see that. When they look at the food section of a newspaper and they see something in there, it clicks, especially, oh, it's blueberry season, you know, and so that's something we're thinking of doing, but it's not something you're going to do right away. If you're, you know, you have to look at your budget, and each year as you get maybe a little bigger, if you can justify, you know, budgeting for these different things. But one of the biggest things that we did real early on is we had a mailing list. And every time we went to the farmer's market, we had a little list out there for people to sign up, sign their name and address. Anytime someone wrote me a check, I got their address and put it in my little mailing list. Early on, the first 3 or 4 years, it was really an important part of our business. And the $100 or so in postage that it cost us was easily outweighed by the amount of customers that it generated.
Approximately 10% of Stan's sales are from his value-added products. Even though it's a small part of his marketing strategy, it's necessary in the long run.
Drawing upon my past history and thinking back to my dad's days in the apple business, there'd be years when the market was good and we wouldn't have enough apples, but the price was high. And then there'd be other years when the price was low, but we'd have too many apples. But he'd always be stuck with these apples, and you had, you know, 2 months to get rid of these apples. So I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to find some way to not rely on that 6-week period. Jam, syrup, some type of value-added situation, some way to use those berries if I didn't sell them. In other words, if I went to the farmer's market and I brought back 50 pounds, what was I going to do with them? Again, our philosophy is we're selling fresh berries. Well, I could put them back in the cooler and sell them next week, but then again, I'm not doing what I say I want to do. So what we do is we throw them in the freezer and we freeze them. And then in this fall and spring and winter, when we're kind of bored, we make jam and syrup and vinegar, and we added a vinaigrette this year. We're always looking for a little new product. Actually, people tell us, why don't you do this, or give us a recipe. So we felt that it was very important for 2 reasons. One, to keep our product fresh on the market and have something to do with the berries that we don't use. Unfortunately, the problem I have now is I can sell all my berries fresh. Yet I know at some point I need that value-added product. I need to be able to sell jam. I need that area to sell my berries.
Are these locally here?
Up by Sandpoint, yeah.
If I have, say, 1,000 units of jam and syrup, that will take me through the farmers markets. I have a couple of fruit stands and small stores that carry my product, but mainly my sales of my jams and my syrups are through the farmers markets and through gift packs. And so that I don't really want to get into the big deal of supplying a lot of stores, because I don't want to work year-round. I mean, that's part of why we're doing what we do, right? But there's a whole different can of worms when you get into that. First of all, where are you going to make this stuff at? You're not allowed, it's against the law just to make it in your kitchen and sell it. You need a legal commercial kitchen. We're lucky here in Bonner County. There's a commercial kitchen in Sandpoint that you can rent the kitchen. I'm even luckier yet. I have a friend that owns a local cafe, so he allows me to use his kitchen, and it costs me a few jars of jam and syrup. So I'm even luckier yet. So I have a place to make it, but that's your that's your biggest problem. Where are you going to make this at? The next thing is you need jars, and you can't just go down to the hardware store and buy canning jars. You need, again, if you're going to sell a jam or a syrup or a vinegar or some type of product at that level, it has to look professional. It has to look like the stuff in the store. But it's fairly expensive, and you have to look at, you have to break down your cost and make sure that, how much is that jar of jam costing me, to make, and is it worth it to do that, and then how much can I charge for it?
Stan pays close attention to food safety and product quality when making value-added products. Also, a little creativity helps turn lemons into lemonade, or in Stan's case, jam into topping.
One of the larger problems of making jam, we'll use jam as the example here, whether it be syrup or vinegar, whatever your product is quality control. Again, like my berries, I want to put out a good product. I rely on people buying my product and buying it again and telling their friends. The berries are easy. They're growing on a bush. We pick them, we put them in a basket, and we sell them. If they're green or they're soft, they're not any good. But jam, you cook it, you bottle it, the sweetness. So you've got to do some things, and you've got to do them the right way. You've got to have a refractometer to check your sugar content of your berries. Every type of berry that you use has a little bit different sugar content. My recipe is very simple. I can't tell you what it is, but it's a very simple recipe. So it's easy to follow, and as long as I do everything right every time, it's usually pretty. It's pretty good. But we've had some jams that didn't gel. Well, now I've got 300 jars of jam. Well, now it's not jam anymore. Now it's topping.
An eye-catching label is essential to attract customers. Certain label information is required when selling food products, including the farm name, address, and a list of ingredients. Other information you may want to include on the label is the price and nutritional value.
And again, before I even planted the first bush, I sat down and I had a 10-year plan of, okay, if I have this many plants and they give me this many pounds and I can sell them for this much money and it's going to cost me this much, how much money am I going to make? And at the end of 10 years, well, I'd have been retired again if it would have done what I thought it was going to do. And even though it didn't turn out the way that I thought, and at times it was close, but some things weren't, I still update it every year. I still have a 10-year plan. I have a plan in my office right now that shows in the year 2009, 2010, how many pounds of berries I am projecting that I'm going to harvest that year, and what type of price I think I could be getting for them, and how much money I could possibly make in the year 2010. Every year it changes, but it is important to spend time doing that and looking ahead to that next level. You don't maybe have to do it for 10 years in advance, but at least 2 or 3 years in advance, especially when you're first starting.
Doing an initial business plan helps you focus on important considerations like family and personal goals, the costs associated with your farm enterprise, and the profit margin needed to reach your goals. Continuing to update this business plan is essential if you want to expand or do improvements to your farm.
The financial plan is important in a lot of ways. Not only is your business viable, is it going to work for your own self-assessment of it, or selling it to your wife or husband, is this going to work? But it's just a professional thing to do. With any business that you go to, they're going to tell you, are we making money, or are we losing money, and how are we doing that? When we first started our business, we kind of had a goal of let's keep everything out of our pocket. If we can't pay for it, then we don't need it. And we were lucky enough to have a little money to start with to do our initial expenses, and the business was basically paying its way after the initial outlay of equipment and things. And anything that we wanted to do additionally, we had to be able to earn it to get it. If we didn't earn it, if we didn't sell enough berries, then we weren't getting it. Well, about a year ago, when we decided to maybe move to another level and try to plant more, to kind of just increase to the next level, putting in a shop, walk-in coolers, walk-in freezer, a commercial kitchen, we didn't have the financing ready cash to do that. So we did need to go to a bank and establish some financing with a loaning institute. And they certainly need, you just can't walk in and say, hey, I'm the blueberry guy and I need $50,000. Okay, well, how can you make $50,000? So the financial plan came in real handy then. One of the advantages of living where we do, North Idaho, is that we're not over-regulated yet, like some states and some counties are. Any business that you start up, you're going to have rules you have to follow, some things that you have to do. Again, we're fairly lucky here. The only things that we have to that are really required is the state requires a tax number, so that for our sales. And during the summer, early on, it was just a 3-month little deal that we'd have to pay our 5% sales tax. Now I'm on a yearly, quarterly tax program, and that's important. You have to have a ID tax number. Other than that, there aren't any real requirements that you have to have. Again, if you're in the commercial kitchen deal, you need to have, from the health department, you need to, a lot of the farmers markets and stores, of course, require you to have your food produced in a commercial kitchen, and it's approved by the health department. So there's a fee there and a little permit that you have for that.
While not required by law, Stan has invested in liability insurance.
We do have liability insurance on the farm for $1 million, or actually might be $2 million if someone does something really bad. But we just got that the last couple of years, and what it came down to, we knew from the beginning it was something that we should do, but it comes down to expenses, and the cost of insurance, was something that we just kind of gambled with, and we didn't get it. Once we reached a certain level, now we're making a lot more jam. We have a lot more pickers out there. We have a lot more U-pickers. We have a lot more at stake. I guess the older we get too, the lot more we have at stake. So we do have liability insurance, and gosh, if I had to do it over again, I would have done it from the first year. Just the idea of knowing that you're covered in case something happens to you. One of the advantages we have as a small farm is that we don't have any full-time help. So all our pickers are paid by the hour, or by the pound. The state law reads, at least don't quote me on this, but at least according to my tax man, as long as no single employee is making more than $600, you can pay them in cash, and you don't have to make any declarations for insurance or workman's comp and so on. So with the amount of pickers we have never had anybody that has come close to that, or we've had them come close but never go over. So we don't have to deal with the employee taxes and all that sort of stuff. So that's a big advantage. If we had to do that, and if it ever came down to being regulated to that degree, it would be a big blow to our business. Again, we put a lot of thought into, is this what we want to do? It can't be a one-year thing. We can't say, well, let's just try blueberries for a year and invest all this money, and if we don't like it, we can sell it. We knew that wouldn't work. So we put a lot of thought into the idea of, do we want to be blueberry farmers? My wife still teaches school and still brings home a nice income, which was very important the first 5 or 6 years. We're at a point now where if things continue to grow and work the way they are, our ultimate goal is so that she could retire from teaching, help me part-time with the blueberry farm. We have a family business.
Smiles. Okay.
I think we got it.
Oh, I see how
We have a 6-year-old daughter who's just reaching an age now where she can start doing some things at the berry field. And growing up on a farm myself, I felt that's a very important part of her development and developing a work ethic. I mean, she can start out picking blueberries, and then eventually she can start selling them at the fruit stand, and pretty soon she can have a garden, or pretty soon she can go to the farmer's market, if that's what she wants to do. But at least she'll have an option to do that. So our long-range goals, it's a family business, and we hope it to be a family business for a long time. I basically, people ask, well, how long are you going to do it? I basically consider that I'm retired now. I had a real job teaching school. Now I'm just, this is a good job, and it's one that I'll try to do as long as I can.
You can read more about blueberry production requirements in these publications. P&W 215, High Bush Blueberry Production, and BUL 815, Growing Blueberries in the Inland Northwest and Intermountain West. Both are available through the University of Idaho Agricultural Publications.